Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Kaiserreich on the Hearts of Iron 4 engine. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Love to see you around more often. And if you would give this video a like, I do appreciate that as well. Let's YouTube know what. Okay, what are we doing here? Oh. Yeah, okay, okay, let's, do we want to take anything in Spain? Ooh, can we take Gibraltar back? I want Gibraltar. They won't let me have Gibraltar. Take all states first. Well, I don't think it's going to let me do that. So they're getting Gibraltar. I want Gibraltar. They're getting the Balearic Islands, and I want that. Because those were British. Those are British. Well, at least, I think Minorca was British. And Gibraltar's British. Well, let's see if we take that. And Grenada. Well, we have Super Gibraltar. I don't know how long it's going to last, but we have Super Gibraltar. Hello, Vernarius. Take Madrid. No, I don't want Madrid. They can have Madrid. I wanted Gibraltar, and I wanted out here in the Balearic Islands. Those are historically British territories. Okay, we don't need our fleet out here anymore. So let's bring our fleet home. Yeah, come home. Can you get through? Yeah, you can get through Gibraltar this time. Oh, Armageddon, good to see you. You hate? No, I hate Americans? Ah. Okay. That's nice of you. Okay, Egypt and Ottoman Empire and those others have signed a peace deal. How is our attack doing here? Fair. Ord Wingate's grinding up some skills here. Ireland has joined the Reich, or however you say that. I know I'm butchering it. Has declared war on the Union of South Africa. Union of South Africa Civil War. Okay, Jan Smuts versus whoever this guy is. Let's start some Lend-Lease. That looks a little better. We can give him some older aircraft. Oh, we have some Curtiss P-1 Hawks from captured. Okay. We can give him a little few of those. There we go. Okay, guys, have fun with your civil war. Now, Jan Smuts, as a younger man, of course, had fought the British, if I'm not mistaken. Though he did, by World War II, generally support the British, and he was very supportive, at least during World War II. Okay, computing machine and mobile defense, cool. Let's grab one of these guys. Send them over to there. I know we may need them back here at home, but I want to protect my empire out here. That's owned by the Germans, I believe. Okay, we can put you there. So at least we'll have some forces if somebody decides to do something rash. Unassign it, yes. Okay, we've got to there and to there. I think we'll just do one each to the zones. Yeah. So the one here that's still here, they can come over and yes, we have. When is okay? We're gonna wait for that to be done. Hello, Max Tag 1. Good to have you here. And great to have Italy represented. Looks like they're sort of kind of getting ready for pincer movement. So let's improved infantry weapons. Very good. That's sort of what I was waiting for this to come over here. And we'll get that going there. And I think, do we push ahead on that? 160 days? No, I think we'll wait for the submachine guns once we get that done. And, well, which means we need to, don't need to, but want to look for, and we are still in 38. No. Go with decryption. And now we are no longer in the midst of a major war. We're still fighting out in India. In Operation Nova Scotia. Homecoming planning. We're looking at that. But treaty with Germany. I don't know that we want to. We'll see about that. This would help our stability, social credit. Yeah, no. Let's do social credit. Let's see. Well, let's see. We'll get the event. Here, during the also correct. Now that we are in power, we can work to implement these ideas throughout the nation. However, critics have accused social credit of being syndicalist, and as such, it would perhaps be wise to moderate our plans. At least they draw the anger. Okay. Yeah, I think we'll try this. Sweden, yeah, I can imagine Sweden wanting something warm to drink like coffee. Oh, it looks like the Germans are fighting the syndicalists in France. Very good. How is my army shaping up? Okay. We are out of manpower, so we are going to cancel. Oh, well, yeah, we want to do that. That'll give us some manpower back. Good. And these guys, let's give them to him. And well, get on trains and get there. Here wouldn't be a bad idea. We could even put you there. I'm not saying Huey Long won't fight me, because it's sort of maybe kind of looking like that, but I think he would first go after either California or something. Civil War in South Africa. The former British Dominion South Africa has descended into chaos. The pro-British province of Cape Town and Natal, as well as Rhodesia, battle with The Afrikaners dominate Orange Free State and Transvaal. Referring to the Fourth Boer War, should we send aid to the Pro-Entente, or should we stay out of it? Okay. More freaking political power. Because we want to help Southern Rhodesia out. And we want to help out our allies. Okay, depends on core events. Okay, yeah, I can imagine that, AZADs. Well, Minnesota, yeah, that was the place the Scandinavians felt most home at. Except for it wasn't very mountainous, I don't think. But it was nice and cold, so they liked it up there. Does this look threatening enough, Huey Long, that we got troops all along your border? Oh, attacking India, yeah. Trade agreement with Norway. Norway has recently approached us with a trade agreement. Oh, well, we gain political power. Yeah, we'll do that. I'm not seeing a major downside here. Could be one, but angers the Kaiserreich or something. Well, now we got back our political power. Good. I want to get to 100 to increase our conscription. Come on, guys, let's just take them down. And we now have more. Oh, we need more aluminum too. Yeah, Dutch East Indies. Okay, okay, well, we have everything that we sort of need. More naval bombers. You know how much I like those. So, naval bombers. And since we have a lot, we can send some aircraft. Let's... Man, we need more airports around here. Yep, all these guys can come. And we can build more. Probably should build some shipyards. also speed this up a little bit because we're not micromanaging a war now. Other than this, assault, assault. Dive bombing, very good, and carrier primacy. Serbia declares war on Albania. Southern Rhodesia has capitulated. Damn, didn't want to hear about that. Okay. We'll push ahead early on that. See if we can increase our lend-lease. Good. Spanish Civil War is over. Interesting. Sort of thought it already was, but okay. Sao Paulo declares war on Brazil. Okay. These guys developed this are crazy. Serbia annexes Albania. Okay, that wouldn't be that difficult. Well, I don't even think they have tank units, but what is their yeah, no, I think I'm giving them the right kind of stuff. I think. I hope. Okay, well, let's build some radars around to sort of see what's going on a little better. Okay, we are completely out of manpower. So we're going to cancel all of these. I'll get us a little bit of manpower. Cossacks aren't an ethnic group. Well, I know Mikhail hasn't been around recently, but he would disagree with you there, Azads. He certainly thinks he's a Cossack. His family thinks they're Cossacks. So I'm disagreeing with you about the idea of the Cossacks. Well, we don't need name calling, Vernaris. You can say he's wrong, you can disagree, you can even shout, but we don't do name calling here. Okay. We just don't do that. Yeah. Or Arno will get out his band sword and whack you one. Ethnicity isn't equated to race. Okay? Ethnicity is not race. At least not the way I understand it. And I don't know, because I'm not a geneticist, whether they have particular genetic traits that single them out in some way. I don't know, because like I say, I'm not a geneticist. If he keeps it up, Arno, you can kick him. Sao Paulo gets Rio de Janeiro. So I don't know if they have Brasilia is where the capital is or something. I don't know. Social credit. Okay. Let's read this. Social credit is an economic philosophy that has developed by Clifford Hugh Douglas during... Sorry, I'm moving the microphone around, I know. So I'm going to readjust my sitting position here. During the Weltkrieg. He believes that the current economic system was designed to create a plutocracy through unnecessary scarcity, and that the workers need to be free from this system by bringing purchasing power in line with production. Douglas's reform program contains two main elements: a national dividend to distribute money equally to all citizens to bridge the gap between earning power and prices, and a price adjustment mechanism that would forestall the possibility of inflation. Now that we are in power, we can work to implement these ideas throughout the nation. However, critics accuse the social credit of being a syndicalist, and as such, it would perhaps be wise to moderate our plans lest they draw anger. Okay, compromise and limit the scale of reforms. Give our citizens a national dividend. Overhaul the existing economic system. No, we're not going to do that. I think we're going to just do limited scale reforms. Do plus protests against social credit. Premier of Quebec, okay. But that does push down what we need to get through here to gain more stability. Form a unity government. Well, we may do that soon. But, Indian investments. Okay. Let's help out the Dominion of India. Okay, no problem, Tippett. You probably already left. Yeah, it depends on how you want to define race. I don't define it too narrowly. Maybe that's because I'm an American. They used to... Okay, well, those of you who are watching on YouTube, if you just here for the Hearts of Iron Kaiserreich play, you can leave now. This is the end of the Kaiserreich gameplay for this episode. We'll be back next time, but I'm going to talk a little bit about things. I don't think we yet understand race. Of course, the Nazis thought they understood race, and they were very, very wrong about it. They were going by things like eye color and skin color, and what may have a little more validity, but not much, bone structure. Okay, because I've seen Indians that look like Europeans, except for they had very, black eyes, black hair, very dark skin. And I do not believe, at least one particular, I remember knowing him in college, I do not believe he was of mixed race. He just looked very European, except for he was very dark. I am guessing it's a combination of generations of people from, because I want to avoid a particular word, from general sort of European northern stock that had migrated down into India and intermixed with locals and adopted to the greater sun levels, as opposed to people living in the north and trying to absorb as much sunlight as they can for the limited amount of the year. So I've definitely seen that. So bone structure has something to do with it, or more than eye color and hair color. The Nazis were out looking for blonde-haired, blue-eyed people and were collecting Eastern Europeans that were probably genetically not Germanic, whatever that genetically means, I don't know. And so they were probably, quote-unquote, polluting, and this is from their standpoint, yeah, oh, I agree with you. There's no master race, Azads. I totally agree with that. And you're right. It goes to some Sanskrit thing that, and I'm trying to avoid the Nazi term just because it's a loaded question, and I do think it's an incorrect term. And you're right. It goes back to Sanskrit and whatever that they sort of pulled out of a hat and called it that and whatnot. So, so I'm talking about some people that bone structure that looks like people from this part of the world living down here long enough to pick up some traits from here. I've seen that. Now, they used to, back in the 70s and 80s, look at several things to determine what race of people lived in Britain. One was how you were buried. 2 was what type of houses you lived in. So they presume, oh, and also 3, very much place names. So they presumed very much that the Anglo-Saxons came in and replaced the Britons. Because if you looked at archaeological evidence, Britons lived in round houses. The Romans come in. The Romans build square houses. Some very few Britons decide to live in square houses. But most, let's say 80% of the British population, continues to live in round houses during the Roman occupation. That lasts hundreds of years. They build Londinium. They build Leeds, I believe, and some of these other cities that are still around here that are named on this and other things. They build these cities, and they build them like this to some degree, you know, like we're seeing here, squared off things. That's not the way the Britons built cities. But the Romans did, and lots of people that were British lived in Roman cities. But most of the people in the countryside, unless you were a rich person, you lived in a Celtic roundhouse. In comes the Anglo-Saxons. After the fall of the Roman Empire and, you know, pushing in, you know, about a lot of that stuff. Well, with the coming of the Anglo-Saxons, they start living in square houses. Even the poorest people, within a generation or two, they live in square houses. They also bury their dead. That many of the Britons continue to bury their dead the same way throughout the Roman occupation, but they start burying their dead almost universally in the Anglo-Saxon manner. And all of the languages and place names and whatnot are Anglo-Saxon, or a great majority of them. You can also see, okay, so they presumed that this part of Britain becomes genetically Anglo-Saxon predominantly. Not that every last person is killed, but most people are replaced. I'm sure some intermixing is presumed that they've done this. Now, and we can see a similar thing up in this part here in the Danelaw, where the Vikings, the Norse, came in and occupied. You will see very early on Viking city settlements that in some ways mirror the Romans, in that they now have they now have streets with lanes and houses built in an orderly fashion, where the Anglo-Saxons would build square houses, but they'd be all, to use a term, higgledy-piggledy. They'd all just be jumbled around, and it was all sort of chaotic, somewhat like the roundhouses. But those are the way they did them when the Anglo-Saxons were over here. They continued to do it once they come here. It was the Vikings that were putting on a ordered street kind of thing, like we still see in many areas in Britain. So they presumed that a lot of the area place names are almost all Viking. So they presumed that there was a Viking replacement population of Norse. Well, now we've been able to do, not we as in me, but people have been able to do genetic testing. And they're doing genetic testing of rural people, not people living in London or in Liverpool or Glasgow that have big industrialized cities that have got people from all over the place now living them. They went rurally, including rurally just, you know, a few miles outside of London, and tried to look up families that have been there forever. And they're finding genetic markers that are British. I'm using that term British. Not Celtic, not Anglo-Saxon, but British predominate. There are a lot of Anglo-Saxon, and you get up here, you get some Norse or Scandinavian markers. But most of the markers here, not just in Wales and Cornwall, but here are British. And IKB may know some of this stuff too. But they're British. And they're figuring out that no, the Druids didn't build Stonehenge. But the people that built Stonehenge are the same people that are there to this day. Because when they've been able to win, because if they can test genetic markers of some of the very ancient peoples, they're these same British people that built Stonehenge are the British people that are there today. Celtism, we have come to find out, I used to think it was a sort of genetic type of people. Well, we're finding out Celtism is a lifestyle. And so you have Celts that sort of the burial areas of styles, some of the stuff we know from the earliest Celtic come from, I think, this part of the world. So there are Celts that are here. And then you talk about Galatians. Oh, those are the Gauls that came down here. Well, I'm sure some Celts did come down here, but I think a lot of these Galatians are local people that adopted Celtic lifestyles. Now, so we have that. So Gauls are different than Britons, are different than the Irish. Because you can look at the Irish and find that they have different genetic markers than the British. I'm using these terms very, very specifically. I'm not saying English. I'm saying British. And so in Scotland, you have a different story. You have Pictish, which is, I think, a different subset or something from the British. But because as you hear the name Scottish, that's the Scotty Irish tribe that migrated up here and did replace a fair amount of the Pictish. Now, the Picts, the Irish, and the British were all different types of Celtic peoples. And so they have different genetic markers. Okay, so now we're talking about Cossacks. Cossacks are... I wish Mikhail was here. You'd probably tell us better, but they're a tribal people. We can say that. And I don't know whether they would be enough to have a genetic marker that you could point to and go, hey, these people are Cossacks because of these genetic markers. I don't know if you can. I don't know if they're too close to Russian, because I understand some of the Cossack tribes were sort of Russian Slavic types that became horse people. Now the Rus simply means red-haired people, and that was given to them by the Byzantines. That is probably an inaccurate term for the Russians. The Rus were probably more the Scandinavians or other people that were coming down with red hair, because the Scandinavians were coming up the rivers and coming down here. So I don't think we... Thanks, Armageddon, yeah. So I don't think we yet understand race. And obviously, if you look at a sub-Saharan African, what in America we often call African American, but I'm not talking about African Americans, because if you look at a good majority of African Americans, not all, and one of the guys I worked with very much didn't seem to be, they are they would be rejected by most Africans. The Africans would call them coloreds, at least that was the term in South Africa for them, and that they're mixed white and black. Very many of them. And as racial barriers break down in the modern world, much, much more mixing between people of European descent and people of African descent. I know my parents, my grandfather owned a ranch out in this area, and there are some Indian reservations down here. Now, the Indians, at least in a couple of tribes, were basically, by the time, they were very small tribes. Hello, JP. That these Indians down here were, well, some of them, one of the tribes was down to 3 or 4 people at one point, and all the men were in jail. I mean, that's how small it got at some point. Though the tribe's grown much bigger now that they have gambling on it. So much more people wanted to claim to be a member of the tribe. But much of the, and I really didn't know them, I'm younger than when they were sort of down there, but they were very dark-skinned because there had been black troops, American black troops, stationed down in the region, and they intermixed with this tribe, or these several tribes, small tribes of Indians, so that I don't know that there would be a genetically pure example of their DNA anymore, because it was mixed with African American DNA. So, and another good Indian friend of mine, he was a good Indian friend, was part Scottish, part Filipino, and part Native American, if you will. And he was a mixture of the 3 of those. And so he very much also identified with this. That's how I knew him, through Scottish organizations and such. Very much identified with his Scottish ancestry, but he was also very much identifying with his Native American ancestry, and somewhat of his Filipino ancestry too. So and so, yeah, we don't understand race, and so I don't claim to understand race, but you look, one group of people living somewhere in Switzerland area has a birthmark type thing on them, generally speaking. And it's thought that this is a small settlement of Huns, you know, from Attila the Hun type period, that after the collapse of the Huns and their retreat, they had settled here. Or maybe it was one of the later nomadic tribes that had come into Europe and most had left. So we can find isolated pockets of ethnic, you know, of genetic groups. And this was sort of combination of tradition and combination of some genetic markers. I am not a racist. I am a culturalist. Part of that, I think, comes from being an American. And so I understand large groups, not individuals. Individuals are individuals. But I understand large groups of people based on culture. Now, sometimes that correlates to racial groups. Because there is in Japan basically 2 racial groups. There's the Japanese, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but there's the probably not Ashigawa, but I think it starts with an A. There's a very early sort of somewhat Eskimo-like tribal group up here that's fading away as they continue to intermix with what we would consider Japanese racial group. And because the Japanese were able to fend off 2 Mongolian invasions, they, for the longest time, have been isolated from the rest of Asia, so that they were able to develop a more unique racial group, and weren't, you know, they weren't like the you know, Britain, where you had the Romans show up. So you have, you know, Latin, you know, Latin genetic mix coming in. Whatever Celtic, because sometimes tribal names, we do believe some of the tribes that were up here were settlement groups to some degree from Gauls, but most, like I was saying, are Britain. But you probably have some Gauls come in, and then after that was before the Romans, and then you have the Romans, and then you have the Anglo-Saxon Jutes and Frisians that come over, and a fair number of their women come over too, but also the men. So we have, waves of Germanic peoples coming in, and then we have the Danelaw. Up here we have, Dublin is basically founded by Vikings. Vikings at some point control the Outer Hebrides and these islands. They never get control of the central Celtic highlands, but they sort of around the periphery. Like I say, the Danelaw, and then the Normans, which are include Britons from Brittany, because they come back up here. They're sort of refugee. They're a mixture of Gauls and refugees that escaped the Anglo-Saxons, along with the Normans, which are Norsemen that had settled here but intermixed with the French, come back in the Norman conquest. So you've had all these waves of people coming in to Britain to make Britain more European, if you will, than what we're seeing in Japan. You don't have waves of Koreans or Chinese or Mongols or whatever coming in. You have them pretty well isolated. Probably the biggest genetic impact, and I don't even know if there is any of, is from their their roughly 50 years of colonialism with Korea and Taiwan, and that's probably very minimal impact coming back to Japan. So sometimes cultural ethnic groups do correlate to a racial group. Another similar might be like Samoan Islanders or Hawaiian Islanders of the tradition, but now, of course, particularly in Hawaii, there is lots of racial mixing between Asians, Europeans, and Hawaiians. So that's starting to fall away, where the Samoans and some of these other islands are much more isolated populations, unless you start counting all the Samoans that live here in California, which may outnumber the Samoans living in Samoa, because they're not that isolated here in California. So that's sort of my understanding of what's going on. And I think, again, race is a factor, but I think the greatest factor in the difference of peoples is their cultural differences, not their racial differences. Obviously, we have my skin will burn probably by sun probably faster than Azad's would, so he has better sun resistance than I do, I presume, because I'm, especially in areas that I don't expose to the sun much, I'm very white. So yeah. Okay, we're going to end the YouTube episode. The Twitch chat is staying there, so all of you on YouTube, thanks for watching, thanks for liking the videos. You can chime in on your topics. I know I've just sort of been skimming the chat while this has been going on, but chime in on that if you wish. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.